The first thing that froze wasn't the room. It was every hand. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Glasses hovered midair. The dishwasher hummed in the kitchen like it didn't get the memo that something had just gone wrong. Ryan had his arms slung around Naomi, loose and possessive, that familiar grin tugging at his mouth. The grin he'd worn since we were kids, the one that said, "I can say whatever I want here." "Hey!" he called out loud enough to cut through the music. "Everyone, look." My sister finally made it. A few heads turned. A few smirks followed. Ryan lifted his drink and tilted his head toward me. "Honestly, she's probably a lesbian or something. Can't keep a man to save her life." The laugh came in waves. Not loud, not proud. The kind that slips out because it's safer to join in than to stand alone. My father didn't laugh. He didn't stop it either. He just watched the ice melt in his glass. My mother smiled into her wine, a tight smile. Practiced. I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't give him the reaction he was shopping for. Naomi's hand slid off his arm. That was the first crack. She didn't raise her voice, didn't roll her eyes. She stepped forward close enough that only he could hear her and said, calm as a weather report, "You should be careful who you humiliate." Ryan's grin faltered. The room didn't know why yet, but something in the air shifted. A pressure change, like the moment before a storm decides whether it's going to hit. That was the second something in me snapped. My name is Elena Brooks. I'm 34 years old, and I've spent most of my life being spoken about instead of spoken to. If you've ever had family treat you like you don't matter, like you're furniture, they can lean on but never look at, go ahead and tap like. Subscribe if you know what it feels like to swallow words until they burn. You're going to want to hear how this starts. The music came back on. Someone clinked a glass too hard. Conversation resumed in that forced, brittle way people use to pretend nothing happened. I stayed where I was by the edge of the living room, my coat still on. I hadn't even set my bag down. Margaret, my mother, caught my eye and lifted her chin, the silent instruction she'd perfected over decades. Don't make this a thing. She'd been teaching me that lesson since I was 8. Back then, dinner always started the same way. Plates placed in front of Ryan first, the best cuts of meat, extra potatoes, gravy ladled thick. Mine came last. Burnt edges, smaller portions, whatever was left when everyone else had what they wanted. If I reached for more, her voice would slice through the table. "Elena, don't be greedy." It was never said sharply. That was the trick. Soft words cut deeper. Dad Thomas never looked up unless something stopped working. Wi-Fi out, printer jammed, remote missing. Elena he'd call like my name was a tool he kept on a hook. Fix it. Ryan never touched a cable in his life. By 12, I learned how to move quietly. Which floorboards creaked, how to carry a plate without letting it clink, how to make myself small enough that no one felt the need to notice me. High school just dressed it up better. Ryan got new sneakers, private tutors, leadership camps that cost more than my first car. I got lectures about being realistic, about not aiming too high, about understanding our limitations. When the acceptance letters came, mine arrived first. Full scholarship, data science program, everything covered. I left the envelope on the kitchen counter, heart pounding like a trapped animal. My mother opened it, scanned the page, then slid it back under a stack of bills. "That's nice, Elena," she said, "but Ryan's visit weekend is coming up. We can't do everything." 2 weeks later, the scholarship was gone, withdrawn, reassigned, explained away as a family decision. That was the night I learned something important. Love wasn't scarce in that house. It was allocated. Back in the living room, Ryan was already telling the story again, louder this time, rewriting it to make himself funnier. "She's always been like this," he said, nodding toward me without looking. "Serious, no personality. Honestly, I don't know how she survives in the real world." Someone chuckled. I felt my jaw tighten. Not from anger, from habit. Naomi stood very still. Her eyes flicked to me, then back to him. Measuring, calculating. Margaret stepped in just enough to smooth the edges. "Ryan," she said lightly, "you know Elena doesn't take jokes well." There it was, the gaslight. polished and familiar. Not he crossed a line, just I was too sensitive. I met my mother's eyes. She didn't flinch. She never did. That was the third snap. I thought of every night I'd stood at the counter eating cold leftovers while Ryan entertained friends at the table. Every achievement I'd folded away and hidden because it was easier than watching her dismiss it. Every time I'd been told to be grateful for scraps. Ryan leaned closer to Naomi, whispering something meant to make her laugh. She didn't. Instead, she reached into her pocket and felt for her phone. I heard the faint click as she unlocked it. A small sound. Sharp. Final. She didn't show anyone the screen. She didn't need to. Ryan noticed the change in her posture, the way her shoulders squared, the way her smile vanished. What he asked, suddenly defensive. "What are you doing?" Naomi looked at him, expression unreadable. "Just making sure I remember tonight," she said. His laugh came out wrong. Too quick, too loud. Margaret set her glass down with a deliberate clink. "Naomi." "Dear," she said, her voice cool now, warning edged beneath the politeness. "Let's not stir things up. It's a family gathering." Naomi nodded once. "Of course," she said. "Family." She said it like a verdict. I watched my mother's smile stiffen, watched her fingers tighten around the stem of her glass until her knuckles went pale. She looked at me then, really looked, and for a brief, dangerous second, I thought she might see what she'd done. Instead, she sighed. "Elena," she said quietly, as if I were the problem that needed to be managed. "Why do you always make things uncomfortable?" That was the moment. Not when Ryan laughed, not when the room joined him, but when my own mother decided that my silence was the offense. The dishwasher clicked off in the kitchen. The house fell into a hush that had nothing to do with the music. I took off my coat, folded it neatly over my arm, and for the first time in my life, I didn't try to disappear. I learned early that being useful was the closest thing to being loved. In the Brooks house, usefulness had rules. It had a hierarchy, and I was never at the top of it. Ryan was born first. That mattered more than anyone ever said out loud. He arrived loud, hungry, demanding space, the kind of baby people passed around and laughed over, the kind they made excuses for. I came 3 years later, quiet, watchful, the kind of child adults forget is in the room until they trip over her. My mother liked to tell the story at parties. Ryan was fearless, she'd say, smiling. Elena was independent. Independent was her word for unattended. When Ryan cried, someone came running. When I cried, they waited to see if I'd stop on my own. I usually did. By 7, I knew how to pack my own lunches. By 9, I knew which bills were overdue by the way my parents argued at night. By 11, I knew how to fix the router faster than my father could finish complaining about it. He'd stand in the doorway, arms crossed. "You're good with this stuff," he'd say, not as praise, but as assignment. Ryan would be sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, volume up. No one ever asked him to help. If I asked why my mother would tilt her head that same soft tone she used for everything uncomfortable. "Don't start," she'd say. "You know your brother has a lot on his plate." It was always full. Mine never was. At the dinner table, Ryan talked about practice, about plans, about what he wanted next. My father nodded along, chiming in with advice. My mother laughed at his jokes, touched his arm when he got animated. I ate quietly. If I tried to join in, Ryan would roll his eyes. "Can we not do this?" he'd say. "I'm trying to eat." And my mother would look at me, not him. "Elena," she'd say, "let him finish." That was the rhythm. Ryan took space. I made room. In middle school, he got braces, then contacts, then a new phone. I got his old one when he dropped it in a parking lot and cracked the screen. "Still works," my father said, handing it to me like a consolation prize. In high school, he got private SAT tutors. I got a stack of library books and a reminder to keep my expectations realistic. "You're smart," my mother told me once, folding laundry. But smart doesn't always mean successful. You need to be flexible. Flexible was her word for folding yourself smaller. I wasn't angry yet. That came later. Back then, I still believed effort would be noticed, that if I just did enough, someone would eventually say my name with pride instead of need. So I worked. I stayed late at school, joined clubs that looked good on applications, taught myself coding from forums and free courses because we couldn't justify paying for extras. Ryan went to camps, leadership retreats, weekend showcases. Every receipt came with a story about investment, about potential, about returns. When my acceptance letter arrived, it felt like oxygen. Full scholarship, tuition, housing, books, the kind of opportunity people tell stories about. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text. I brought the envelope home and placed it on the counter like an offering. My mother opened it while stirring soup. She read it once, twice. "That's great," she said, already turning back to the stove. "But Ryan's campus visit is next week. Those flights aren't cheap." I waited. She didn't look back. 2 days later, my father told me we'd had a family emergency. A week after that, the school emailed to confirm my withdrawal. Ryan never asked why I wasn't leaving for college. He just assumed. The summer I turned 18, my grandmother slipped me a check at a barbecue. $500, folded carefully into my palm. "Don't tell your mother," she whispered. I hid it in a drawer under my socks. 3 days later, it was gone. Ryan needed new tires. My mother called it a loan. It was never mentioned again. That was when the numbness set in. Clean, cold, protective. I enrolled in community college, night classes, 2 buses each way. I worked mornings at a grocery store, evenings at a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and fryer oil. I paid for every credit myself, every book, every lab fee. Ryan flew home on breaks with stories about parties and trips and people I'd never meet. Once during winter break, he totaled the car my father bought him. The next morning, my father looked at me over his coffee. "You're good with logistics," he said. "Take the bus to the shop and handle the paperwork. Ryan has practice." I did it without arguing. That's the thing no one tells you about being the invisible one. You stop resisting because resistance costs energy, and energy is something you learn to ration. By 22, I had 2 degrees and no debt. I had a savings account I didn't tell anyone about. I guarded it like contraband. My mother found it anyway. Ryan needed help with applications, coaching, recommendation letters that cost more than my monthly rent. $8,000 disappeared in an afternoon. She left a note on my desk. "We'll pay you back when things settle." They never settled. I still came home sometimes, still cooked dinner, still washed dishes. I ate standing up when my seat was taken by one of Ryan's friends. No one noticed. And when I finally stopped coming around as much, no one noticed that either. That was the house I grew up in. Not cruel, just selective. Love wasn't withheld. It was distributed with intent. Years later, when Ryan laughed about my dating life like it was a punchline, it didn't hurt the way it should have. It just confirmed something I'd known since childhood. I was never meant to be chosen there. And once you understand that something shifts, you stop asking, you stop hoping, you start building a life that doesn't require permission. Standing in that living room watching my mother smooth things over like she always did, I felt the old instinct rise, the urge to shrink, to apologize for existing. It passed, because this time I wasn't there to be chosen. I was there to watch what happened when the rules finally broke. Naomi didn't enter my life like a rescue. She arrived like a mirror. We met at an agency that ran on unpaid overtime and loud confidence. Glass walls, cold brew on tap, creative directors who loved the sound of their own voices more than results. She sat 2 desks over, always early, always calm, the kind of person who listened all the way through before speaking. On our 3rd week, a senior strategist took credit for a deck I'd built from scratch. Naomi watched it happen without reacting. After the meeting, she rolled her chair over and said quietly, "He didn't even change the font." That was the first time someone named it. We started eating lunch together, then staying late, then complaining in whispers while the office emptied out and the cleaning crew pushed carts down the hall. We bonded over the same things: bad leadership, stolen credit, the exhaustion of pretending this was normal. One Thursday night, we were sitting on the floor of the break room eating cold noodles when Naomi said, "We're better than this." Not angry, not dramatic, just factual. I looked at her. Better how she shrugged. Smarter, faster, hungrier. And no one here notices unless you're loud. 2 weeks later, we both quit. No speeches, no exit interviews, just laptops closed and badges dropped on HR's desk. We started Blue Harbor Collective from her apartment. A folding table, 2 mismatched chairs, a whiteboard she found on Craigslist. I handled the systems. data, strategy. The work that doesn't look impressive until it works. Naomi handled clients, operations, the human side, the part people trusted. It was clean, balanced, uncomplicated. Our first client paid $2,000. I stared at the transfer like it might vanish if I blinked. Naomi laughed and ordered cheap takeout to celebrate. By the end of that year, we broke even. The year after that, we moved into a real office. Nothing fancy, low ceilings, bad lighting. But it was ours. When the revenue crossed 6 figures, we didn't tell anyone. When it crossed 7, we still didn't. I didn't bring my family into it because I didn't need to. They found out anyway. My mother showed up one afternoon with cookies and questions. "So what exactly do you do?" she asked, glancing around the office like she was assessing resale value. I explained, briefly, carefully. She nodded, not really listening. "You know," she said, "Ryan's been struggling to find the right fit since graduation." The sentence landed heavy. I didn't respond. Naomi didn't either. 2 weeks later, Ryan showed up in a blazer that still had the tag tucked inside the sleeve. "Mom said you might need fresh ideas," he said, grinning like he'd already been hired. We didn't need fresh ideas. We needed consistency, but Margaret had already decided. "He's family," she said on the phone, "and he has a creative mind. This could be good for you. For you, not us." Against my better judgment, we gave him a trial role. Limited access, clear boundaries. He ignored all of them. Ryan didn't create. He curated. He hovered. He talked loudly in meetings and said nothing concrete. The first time it happened, I almost missed it. I stayed late building a campaign for a sportswear client. Trends, hooks, posting cadence. Everything mapped and timed. I saved the file in the shared drive and went home. The next morning, the same deck sat in the client folder under a different name, Ryan's. Same slides, same order, same typos. Just a new cover. I stared at the screen, then at the revision history. There it was, my timestamps, my edits, his upload. In the meeting, he presented it like muscle memory. "This approach leverages urgency," he said, nodding at a chart I'd built at 1:42 a.m. "It's about momentum." The room nodded. The client smiled. Naomi didn't look at me. Not yet. Afterward, she closed her office door and said one word. Document. So I did. Every file, every version, every copied caption, every deck that left my hands and came out of his mouth. It became routine. I worked. He renamed. They applauded. Ryan started referring to me as execution. Not to my face. In meetings. "Elena's great at details," he'd say, leaning back. "But vision. That's my lane." The new hires laughed. I didn't correct him. I saved the Slack messages. Then the money started moving. Small at first. 5,000. 8. Always labeled as vendor expenses or influencer deposits. I noticed the pattern because patterns are what I do. Transfers late on Sundays, right after big games, always cleared before Monday. I pulled the logs, quietly, built a spreadsheet no one else saw. The amounts climbed, 10,000, 15. The vendor names changed, the account numbers didn't. One night I traced a payment through 3 shells and found the endpoint. A betting platform. That was when the anger finally arrived. Not loud, focused. I started keeping a folder on an encrypted drive. I named it nothing. No label, no emotion. Inside screenshots, logs, recordings, copies of approvals I never signed. Ryan grew bolder. He approved his own expenses, signed my digital signature on invoices, posted in the main channel that I was overwhelmed lately. People reacted with laughing emojis. Naomi watched it all, silent, still. She never defended me in public. That mattered, because it told me she was thinking the same thing I was. By the time the total crossed 6 figures, I had everything. Dates, times, amounts, intent. And then Lauren called. She'd been our financial controller before Ryan arrived. Quiet, precise, gone without explanation months earlier. She didn't ask how I was. She sent a file. 42 pages. Color-coded. Annotated. Every transfer. Every forgery. Every inconsistency. I sat on my couch in the dark and scrolled until my phone died. When I plugged it back in, there was a message from Naomi. "We need to talk." We met in her office after hours, no lights, just the glow from the city through the windows. She listened while I laid it all out. Didn't interrupt, didn't react. When I finished, she said, "He doesn't know, does he know?" She nodded. Once. Good. That was the moment I understood. Naomi hadn't stayed silent because she was unsure. She stayed silent because she was waiting. Waiting for the story to be finished. Waiting for the truth to be undeniable. Waiting for the kind of ending that doesn't require raised voices. I thought of my mother's words. "Why do you always make things uncomfortable?" This time, I wasn't going to. I was going to let the discomfort do the work for me. The difference between rage and resolve is patience. Rage wants to be seen. Resolve wants to be precise. I didn't confront Ryan when the numbers crossed 6 figures. I didn't slam a folder on a desk or demand answers. I didn't warn him. Warnings give people time to erase themselves. Instead, I slowed down. I started leaving the office earlier, letting my Slack status sit idle, answering questions with fewer words. I let him believe the story he was already telling, that I was tired, distracted, slipping. He liked that version of me. In meetings, he'd lean back and say things like, "Elena's bandwidth has been tight lately," with a sympathetic smile. "I'm happy to step in." People nodded. They always did. Naomi played her part too. Calm, supportive, publicly aligned with him. She posted photos from client dinners, laughed at his jokes, let him wrap an arm around her waist in front of people who mattered. Every smile was camouflage. Behind closed doors, we worked like surgeons. We stopped talking in the office, stopped texting, switched to a shared encrypted drive that lived nowhere near company servers. Every file duplicated, every log mirrored, every receipt cross-checked. Lauren joined us quietly. We met at a coffee shop that smelled like burnt espresso and bleach. No laptops out, no names spoken above a murmur. She slid a flash drive across the table like it weighed something. "I stayed longer than I should have," she said. "Remote access, read only." I thought I was being paranoid until the math stopped working. The drive contained more than I expected. Bank reconciliations, vendor records, timestamps mapped against public sports schedules, even IP addresses tied to the same 2 locations over and over. "It's not just theft," she said. "It's intent." That word landed differently. Intent changes everything. We took the drive to a firm Naomi already knew. Downtown, glass walls, no nonsense. The attorney didn't dramatize it. She skimmed the summary once, then again slower. "This isn't a civil dispute," she said finally. "This is fraud. Multiple counts. And some of these filings, she tapped the page that's federal territory." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not fear. Finality. "What happens if we file?" Naomi asked. "He won't know until it's too late," the attorney said. "And when he does, it'll be loud." That was what we needed. We built the timeline backward, not from the crime, from the moment we wanted him to realize it was over. The company holiday party was scheduled for December 31st, at my parents' house. My mother had insisted. "It'll be symbolic," she said. "New year, fresh start." Ryan loved symbolism, loved an audience even more, so we let the date stand. For the next 3 weeks, we moved like nothing was wrong. Ryan approved expenses. We watched. Ryan bragged about bonuses. We documented. Ryan forged my signature again. We logged it. Every click, every transfer, every lie. Naomi stayed close to him, close enough to hear his plans. His arrogance had grown careless. "They'd be lost without me," he said one night, swirling his drink. "I'm basically the brand." She smiled, asked questions, let him talk. He never noticed the way she stopped drinking halfway through the night. Never noticed she kept her phone face down on the table. The complaint was drafted in sections, annotated, indexed. Lauren compiled a master spreadsheet so clean it was almost beautiful. Red highlights for unauthorized transfers, blue for forged approvals, yellow for misclassified expenses. When it was done, the total sat just under $200,000. Naomi stared at the number for a long time. "He thought no one would check," she said. "He thought I wouldn't," I replied. The filings went out in sealed envelopes, hand-delivered, logged, time-stamped, no emails, no alerts. The waiting began. That part surprised me. How calm it felt. I slept better than I had in months, ate full meals, let my phone die overnight without panic. I wasn't bracing anymore. I was counting down. The night before the party, Naomi texted one line. "He's nervous." I didn't ask why. The morning of December 31st, I packed a small suitcase. One change of clothes, laptop, charger. The flash drive now duplicated 3 times and stored in 3 different places. I didn't pack anything sentimental. I didn't need to. When I arrived at my parents' house that evening, the lights were already blazing, every window glowing like a showroom. The smell of cinnamon and pine hit me as soon as I opened the door. Ryan's voice carried from the living room, loud, confident, performing. My mother spotted me and smiled too quickly. "You made it," she said. "Good. Try to be pleasant tonight." I set the suitcase by the stairs. "I always am," I said. She frowned like she couldn't tell if that was sarcasm. Ryan clapped me on the shoulder as I passed. "Look who showed," he said. Ready to start the year with a better attitude, I met his eyes. Held them. Something like that. Naomi stood near the fireplace. Dress immaculate, posture relaxed. She didn't look at me right away. She couldn't. When she did, it was brief, a fraction of a nod. Enough. The room filled. Cousins, neighbors, friends of friends, champagne uncorked, laughter layered over itself. My father hovered near the television, fiddling with the volume. My mother floated, correcting napkins, adjusting smiles. 5 minutes to midnight. Ryan raised his glass. "All right," he said. "Quick toast." The countdown began on the screen behind him. Numbers flashing, music swelling. He turned toward me, that grin back in place, the one he wore when he wanted to cut. "Here's to my sister," he said. "Still single, still serious, still a mystery." A ripple of laughter moved through the room. My mother smiled into her drink. Naomi stepped forward. She reached for the remote and turned the television off. The screen went black. The room fell silent so fast it felt physical. Naomi didn't rush. She let the quiet stretch. Then she pressed one button. The screen lit up again. A logo appeared. Clean, minimal. Blue Harbor Collective. Below it, a single line of text, "Ryan Brooks termination, effective immediately," gasps. Phones lowered. Someone dropped a glass. Ryan blinked. "What is this?" Naomi turned to the room. "My name is Naomi Clark," she said evenly. "I'm co-founder and managing partner of this company. Not a guest, not a +1. She clicked. Bank transfers filled the screen. Dates, amounts, red highlights. Another click. Email threads, forged approvals. My digital signature copied and pasted. Another, Slack messages. Ryan dismissing my work, claiming it as his own. My mother's glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Ryan lunged forward. Naomi stepped back and handed the remote to me. I caught it without looking. "You're done," I said. "Accounts are frozen. Access revoked." The doorbell rang. 3 sharp knocks. My father moved toward the door, confused. "Did someone order?" He opened it. 2 men stood outside, badges visible under the porch light. "We're here regarding Ryan Brooks," one of them said. "We have a warrant." The room erupted. Ryan's face drained of color. My mother sank into a chair, hands shaking, whispering my name like it was a plea. I didn't answer. I picked up my suitcase. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for something to break. I was watching it fall exactly where it should. The fireworks started early that year. You could hear them before midnight, sharp cracks in the distance, echoing off frozen pavement, too eager to wait for permission. Inside the house, time stalled. One of the men stepped forward, calm, practiced. He said Ryan's name again, said it clearly, said it like it was already written somewhere permanent. Ryan laughed once. A short, ugly sound. "This is a joke," he said, looking around the room for backup. "Tell them. This is a misunderstanding." No one moved. Naomi stood beside me, hands loose at her sides, not shaking, not triumphant, finished. The second man read the warrant. Fraud, misrepresentation, unauthorized transfers, words that didn't care how charming Ryan had once been. My father took a step toward him, then stopped. like he'd finally realized his authority didn't work outside the house. My mother's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Elena," she said, "please. That word. Again." Ryan tried to bolt, not far, just enough to prove something instinctual had taken over. One of the men caught his arm, the other guided him back with a pressure that said this was already decided. The cuffs clicked shut. That sound landed harder than the fireworks. Ryan looked at me then. Really looked. Not like a joke, not like a prop, like a problem he'd never solved. "You did this," he said, voice cracking. "You set me up." I met his eyes. "No," I said. "You did." Naomi didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The men led him toward the door. My father stepped aside without touching him. My mother stayed frozen hands pressed to her mouth, eyes wide, like she was watching something irreversible. At the threshold, Ryan twisted back one last time. "This isn't over," he said. I nodded. "That's true," I said, "but it's not mine anymore." The door closed behind them. Silence rushed in to fill the space he'd left. My mother's knees buckled. She sank into a chair glass, crunching under her heel. She looked smaller than I remembered, older, like something essential had been taken from her and she didn't know how to name it. She looked at me again. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why didn't you say something sooner? That was the last illusion to die." I picked up my suitcase. The handle felt solid, real. "I did," I said. "You just never listened." Naomi was already at the door. She didn't reach for me, didn't hug me. She knew better. We walked out together. The cold hit hard, clean, honest. Across the street, neighbors were counting down voices, rising champagne, spilling over paper cups. Someone cheered, someone kissed, life continuing without permission. Behind us, the house glowed too bright, like it always had. We didn't look back. The drive out of town was quiet. No music, just the sound of tires on pavement and the steady hum of the engine. At midnight, the sky lit up in red and gold. Naomi glanced at the clock, then at me. "Happy New Year," she said. I smiled. It was the first one that felt accurate. Austin felt different from the start. Wider skies, slower mornings, a city that didn't know our history and didn't ask for it. We reopened the company under the same name. Same partnership, same terms. 50-50. Always. Most of the team came with us. The rest scattered quietly once the filings went public. Clients followed. New ones showed up without being chased. Lauren joined us full-time. She moved her family south and took the office with the corner window. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. The case dragged on the way cases do. Depositions, filings, numbers argued over by people who billed by the hour. Ryan took a plea, restitution, penalties, a future with limits. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't need to. My parents sold the house that spring. Too much debt, too many liens. They downsized to something smaller, closer to the airport. They never called. Neither did I. People ask sometimes if I regret not saying goodbye, if I wish I'd explain myself one last time. I don't. Explanation is something you offer when you're asking to be understood. I'm not. On quiet evenings, Naomi and I sit on the balcony outside the office and watch the river move. Kayaks drift past. Bats spill out from under the bridge at sunset, a black ribbon against the sky. We don't talk about Ryan, or my parents, or the house that taught me how to disappear. We talk about what we're building next. Somewhere on my laptop there's still a folder, encrypted, untouched, filled with proof. I don't open it anymore. I don't need to. The work speaks, the silence holds, and every morning I walk into a life that chose me back.